Hey everyone, it's Daniel. Welcome back. In the last video, we talked about some great math tricks you could use on the SAT and ACT, but now let's change it up a bit and talk about some grammar tricks you could use on each test. These strategies pertain to the English section on the ACT, which is their section 1, and the writing and language section on the SAT, which is their section 2. For simplicity's sake, I'll just refer to these as the grammar sections, even though each test calls them by a different name. But they're testing the same content, so the same tricks apply to both. If you find these strategies helpful, please hit the like button, share, and subscribe. You could also leave a comment down below with which of these tricks you found to be the most helpful. And be sure to hit the notification bell so that you can be updated whenever I post a new video. I really appreciate your support. Thank you. Okay, grammar tricks. Here we go. Let's start with a recap of how to navigate the grammar sections. I covered this in more detail in video 9 here. Check it out. But here's a quick recap. Don't answer the grammar questions in the order that they appear. You'll see two types of grammar questions within a section. The first I'll call a quick fix question. For these questions, all you have to do is fix a piece of punctuation or just fix a certain word. You could handle them fairly quickly. Other questions are the organization questions. This is when they ask how you should shuffle sentences within a paragraph, or they'll ask if a certain thought or phrase would help the author's overall point. So, don't do the questions in order. Start by reading the passage, and when you get to a quick fix question, you can do it, and continue through the passage this way. Reading, answer a quick fix. Reading, answer a quick fix. But when you get to an organization question, skip it. Why? Well, one, it's more time efficient. This way, if you run out of time on the final passage, that way you could at least answer the quick fix questions before you're out of time. You could handle more of them quickly in the time it takes you to just do one organization question. But there's another reason as well, the comprehension factor. You might only be on the first paragraph when they ask something like, does this sentence help the author's overall purpose? If you're only on the first paragraph, you don't have enough information to answer that question yet. So don't feel like you need to do the grammar questions in the order that they appear. Answer the quick fix questions in tandem with the passage as you read. But when you get to an organization question, skip it. Continue through the passage this way, and then after you finish the passage, then go back to the organization questions. It's more time efficient, and you'll have a better sense of those questions after you read the full passage. Okay, now let's get to some actual grammar rules you'll see on each test, and some great tricks to help. Both the SAT and the ACT like to test the difference between effect with an A and effect with an E. Let's look at a sample question. Scientists worry that the greenhouse effect will affect our planet even more in the coming century. Here's a great trick to help you here. Think of the word raven, R-A-V-E-N. This is a great mnemonic device to help you remember the difference between effect and effect. It stands for this. Remember, affect is a verb and effect is a noun. This is a great trick to help you remember the difference between the words. So, knowing that, let's go back to the original question. Press pause, give it a shot. When they say the greenhouse effect, that's a noun. The greenhouse effect is a thing. So the first one would be E, the greenhouse effect. And then when they say it will affect our planet, that's an action, or a verb. So the second one is an A. Greenhouse effect with an E will affect our planet A in the second part. My students find this extremely helpful to remember the difference between effect and effect. However, let me just give one caveat to this trick. This is not the full explanation of how to use effect versus effect in the real world. Just so your English teacher doesn't call me a liar, there are other variations that do not follow the explanation we just talked about. I know. So, for example, if you want to say, to affect change in the community, that's effect with an E, but it's being used as a verb. Also, if a character from a book has a certain affect about them, that's affect with an A, used as a noun. So, there are exceptions to the raven trick. I know, but these variations do not appear on the SAT or the ACT. So, for purposes of taking these tests, stick with raven and you'll be fine. Outside of the test, yes, there are other variations. Another great trick on the grammar sections is to eliminate identical choices. Before we look at this, let's quickly recap a topic that we covered in video 12. Check out that video for a full explanation of how to use commas on each test. But let's just look at one of those rules now so we could then get to the trick. Richard, who is an excellent piano player, can recite 50 digits of pi. In video 12, we talked about how you can use commas to separate information that's not essential. So the question is, does this sentence have information that can be cut? Yes. We don't need that little chunk, who is an excellent piano player. It's a little extra information about Richard, but we don't need it. Let's prove that. I'm going to read the sentence without that chunk. Richard can recite up to 50 digits of pi. That's fine. We don't need it. That means that information could be removed or separated on either side with comma and comma. The answer is C. That separates the info with comma, comma. So when you have info that you don't need, you could separate it as comma, comma, but it could also be dash, dash, or parentheses, parentheses. You just can't mix and match and go comma, dash, or dash, comma. It has to stay the same. So with the rule, now let's try it with a trick. Here's another. Announcer Howie Rose does an excellent job of describing the action from the booth. Press pause, give it a shot. Again, the question we want to ask is, can we remove anything? So let's try to read the sentence without his name. Announcer does an excellent job of describing the action from the booth. That doesn't make sense. We need his name. That means everything is essential. So there shouldn't be any punctuation. The answer is F. It's fine the way it is. But let's pretend we didn't know that for a second. Look at choices G and J. In G, they're separating his name with comma, comma. And in J, they're separating his name with dash, dash. Those essentially mean the same thing. They can't both be right. That means that they're both out. So this brings us to a very helpful grammar trick on those sections. If two answer choices both mean the same thing, they're both wrong. Let's look at another variation. Hybrid cars, which were once a novelty, now making up a significant share of the automotive market. Press pause, give it a shot. I'll give away on this one that the answer is D. It's not correct as written because it's a fragment. Hybrid cars now making up a significant share doesn't make sense. So that eliminates it the way it is. The answer is D. Hybrid cars now make up a significant share. That's fine. But let's look more carefully for a moment at B and C. In B, they're separating the clauses with a period, and in C, they're separating them with a semicolon. These are used the same way. A period is used between two independent clauses or two full thoughts, and so is a semicolon. A semicolon can only be used between two full thoughts. B and C mean the same thing. That means they're both out. So this is a great trick to use to help you eliminate wrong answers. Now, I'm stressing very heavily, there needs to be nothing else different about the choices. If there's something different somewhere else within the choice, this doesn't apply. But as long as both choices are identical, and the only difference between them is semicolon versus period, they can't both be right. It means they're both out. This is a great way to eliminate wrong answers on each test. If they mean the same thing, you could eliminate both. Here's another topic that both tests like. Think about which pronoun is correct in this sentence. I'll read it as a blank. The principal asked my friend in blank to create a mural that would honor the soldiers who fought in World War II. Throughout the year, students love to tell me that a teacher has told them it's only correct to say someone and I, and that it's never correct to say someone and me. So before we start, I just want to put out there, that's not true, in case you were ever taught that. Sometimes I is good, and sometimes me is good. The question is, when do you use each? You use the word I as a subject. That means you use I if you're doing the action, like I throw a ball or I eat pizza or whatever. You use the word me if you're receiving the action. That's called an object, like someone threw the ball to me or my friend made dinner for me. Again, I does the action and me receives the action. So now that we know that, let's give it a shot. Press pause and think about which pronoun is right. So the question is, what noun is doing the action in the sentence? The principal. The principal is asking you and your friend to do something. That means the principal is the subject and you and your friend are the object. It needs to be the principal asked my friend and me to create a mural, blah, 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 blah. Now let's pretend none of that made sense to you. Here's a great trick to determine the difference between a subject pronoun and an object pronoun. I'm going to read the sentence without the portion my friend end. That's purposefully there to get in the way a little bit. Let's see how this sounds. The principal asked me to create a mural, blah, 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 blah. That helps you hear it much more clearly. So this brings us to a very helpful trick for pronouns. If you see a pronoun that is preceded by a noun, take out the noun. That helps you hear it much more clearly. Let's try that on a question. Despite what Jack knew was best, the other players and him failed to stretch after practice. Press pause, give it a shot. So we need to ask, are Jack and his friends doing an action here? Yes, by saying they failed to stretch is an action. That means they are the subject. We need the subject pronoun, he. The answer is H. Now, it probably sounds a little strange to your ear to say the other players and he failed to stretch after practice. So let's do it with the trick. I'm going to take out the other players and let's see how this sounds. Despite what Jack knew was best, he failed to stretch after practice. And now you could hear it. A great trick for a pronoun is to take out the noun that's in front of it. The concept of subject and object relates to this rule as well. Think about what words would be correct in each sentence here. Blank threw the ball, and to blank should I throw the ball. To determine the difference between who and whom, we need to ask ourselves the same question as the last example. Are they doing or receiving an action? You use the word who as a subject when they're doing the action, and use the word whom as the object when they're receiving the action. So, press pause, give it a shot. In that first sentence, they're doing the action. That means they're the subject, or who. Who threw the ball is correct. But in the second one, they're receiving the action. That means they're the object. To whom should I throw the ball? Now, let's pretend you had a little trouble understanding that. Here's a nice trick. Think about how you write a fancy letter. When you write a fancy letter, you start it as, to whom it may concern. This is a great way to remember the difference between who and whom. You're writing the letter to whom it may concern because the person is getting the letter. They're receiving that action. That means they're the object or a whom. So if you have trouble remembering the difference between who and whom, remember to write to whom it may concern. That tells you that person would be the object. Who does the action or is the subject. Let's try one more. Nico remembered to bring a guitar, but left his case at Ryan's house. Press pause, give it a shot. So let's talk about a pronoun. Anytime you have a pronoun, you want to determine what word it's referring to. This pronoun is referring to the word guitar, and that's singular, so we want to say its case. That knocks out J. J would mean plural. So the question is, how do we make the word its possessive? A lot of my students like to tell me that it's F, fine the way it is, with the apostrophe S. However, it gets a little tricky on a pronoun. If you want to make a pronoun possessive, it actually doesn't get an apostrophe. The answer is G, its case with just ITS. To say IT apostrophe S means it is, or that's a contraction. It doesn't show possession. Tricky. But now let's talk about choice H. ITS apostrophe is literally never the answer. It's not a word in the English language. So this brings up a very helpful hint on both tests. Any answer that puts its as a choice is wrong. ITS apostrophe is literally never the answer. These are some of the most popular grammar rules that you'll see on the SAT and ACT, and some of the best tricks to help you with them. I hope you found them helpful. Give them a try on your next practice test and see how they start to earn you more points. And check out my next video where we'll cover some reading strategies as well. See you there. And remember, plan your work, work your plan.